It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. With the Steelers bye week now in the rearview mirror, we turn to the trade deadline, which is tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. We'll talk about what the Steelers need, the moves they've been trying to make behind the scenes, but haven't come to fruition, and if they're going to buttress the wide receiver position, who are the players they could target. We'll talk about that, whether this defense can be ready for this Commanders offense that ranks 4th in the NFL, and a look at what happened across the AFC North during the Steelers bye week, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find all of our North Shore Drive podcast shows on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes that come out here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as the daily content that comes out from all our Post-Gazette sports writers throughout the week. As always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Now, Ray, let's talk about this trade deadline coming up because the Steelers have been in quote-unquote talks about trading for a wide receiver for months. People have been, rumoring it. People have been talking about it. And another one came out this weekend with Adam Schefter, who came out and said that the Steelers were in the process of getting a deal done for wide receiver Christian Kirk from the Jaguars, but he broke his collarbone last week, and that kind of killed those trade talks. And now the Steelers are in a position where there are now less than 48 hours before the trade deadline expires, 5 p.m. Tuesday, and that's going to put the Steelers behind the eight ball if they actually do want to make a trade for another receiver to place beside George Pickens right now. There's been rumors of guys like D.K. Metcalf, which I think is just very unlikely considering the Seahawks are one game out of first place in the NFC West. There's been rumors about Jakobi Meyers. I can see that one a little bit more. But then there's the normal names like Adam Thielen from the Panthers or Darius Slayton from the Giants. Ray, if you had to put your money down on one or the other happening, will a trade happen for the Steelers receiver before the deadline, or are they sticking with the crew that they got?
Yeah, I think it's obvious, Chris, that Omar has been trying. So the fact that he is still, working the phones, I think that means something, right? They're not satisfied with their depth at receiver, and I've said this all along. It's not so much about adding like a difference maker now who's going to come in and change your offense all around. I think right now you have to focus on getting quality depth, because if George Pickens goes down, it's not going to be pretty with this offense. So they need another body. If I had to say one way or the other, I think Omar will get something done. But they've had a hard time. Listen, it was Brandon Ayuk, it was Davante Adams, the Christian Kirk thing. He swung and missed a couple of times here. We'll see if he can connect here over the next 36 to 48 hours.
Right. And also, the means of how he swung and missed has been different, right? People were like, oh, he should be going after Brandon Ayuk. Well, you and I talked about it all summer. He was lowballing the Niners. He wasn't trying to go all out to get Brandon Ayuk. It was like, hey, if you want to deal him, here's the offer. And then eventually the Niners signed him, and it turns out the Steelers dodged a bullet there because Brandon Ayuk's out for the season. Davante Adams, was that going to be the answer? Well, Davante Adams hasn't exactly worked out too great. The Jets just finally won a game with him, this past weekend. So, I think that the Steelers' approach has been one of patience and one of let's take advantage of this if there's an opportunity. But the Steelers have been the team that have traded away the named wide receiver that people thought, could be a big playmaker somewhere else, and gotten the great return. And that's, of course, when they traded away Chase Claypool and got a second-round pick that turned into Joey Porter Jr. from the Chicago Bears. I think that Omar Khan, whereas he wants to improve the wide receiver room, I think he more so doesn't want to be the Bears who overpaid for a receiver that they never ended up using. And sure, Darius Slayton, Christian Kirk, guys like that, they're not of the caliber. They're like Chase Claypool, who's basically out of the league at this point. But I think he's also acknowledging, like, hey, these first two drafts the Steelers have hit on, they've gotten hit after hit after hit, guys that are starting right now and being good contributors, especially in the 2nd through 4th round picks. So with that, why would you just give up those picks for a player that you might have 2 years? Like, if you look at Jakobi Meyers right now, his contract makes more sense than most people's. Like, when you look at other big names, like Devontae Adams' contract made no sense for the Steelers to take it on. DK Metcalf's contract a little bit harder, but Jakobi Meyers is more doable. Like, if they got him from this year, right now he'd be on the team for the next 2 seasons that they'd be on the hook for. And this year, he's a $9.4 million cap hit for the Raiders. I imagine that there'd be something worked out. It'd be a lot less because it's halfway through the season. And then next year, he's a $14.9 million cap hit for the Raiders. But as the current dead money situation looks for them, they'd keep about $8.3 million. The Steelers would take him on a $6.6 million. $6.6 million for a receiver next year and a receiver this year. That's a pretty good deal. But the question is, what would you give up? What would the Raiders want for a Jakobi Meyers? If it's anywhere around the 4th, that makes sense, I think. But the question is, Ray, is, can the draft capital line up with the salary cap space and the fit that the Steelers need at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think we can all agree the receivers who are left, Chris, they're all going to go for mid to late round picks. The Steelers are
look at Deontay Johnson.
Yeah. I mean, look at that deal. I mean, they are not going to give away a pick on the first 2 days of the draft. So anything we're talking about, I'd even be surprised. If they gave up a 4, people have to remember they're going to have to give Chicago a 6th round pick. The Steelers are a team that likes to draft and develop players. So they're not just going to say, oh, yeah, we'll give you a 4th round pick. The 4th round pick in the year that you already are going to lose your 6th is pretty valuable. So, I'm probably more comfortable saying 5th round for a guy like Myers. Obviously 7th rounder for a guy like Mike Williams. I mean, he's really not in their current or their long-term plans. And other guys, Adam Thielen, 7th rounder, conditional pick, something like that. The Steelers aren't going to have to pay a lot for the types of receivers who are left out there right now.
I agree. I think that's the key thing here is the paying that they'd be doing to get a receiver. Like, the Deontay Johnson trade, there was a swapping of picks. It wasn't even a loss of a pick truly for the Ravens. Granted, he also had 0 catches for 0 yards on his first game with the Ravens, but with all that being said, we got to turn to what the Steelers are actually doing on the field. The trade deadline comes up this Tuesday. Follow all of the updates behind them. If the Steelers do make a move, you can read all about it in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. But here in the North Shore Drive podcast, we're going to keep talking about the Steelers, their defense, and as well as what happened in the AFC North this weekend, all next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, we'll remind you the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that question, whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies. Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. All right, we're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, you wrote about the Steelers' defense and them being prepared to take on Daniels in this upcoming matchup with the Commanders. Daniels has been a phenomenal rookie quarterback. I think he's put himself in that definitely in the offensive rookie of the year conversation. And when you look at the current standings in the league and where things are right now, the Commanders have the 4th best scoring offense in the NFL at 29.2 points per game. That's just ahead of the Bills. If you need a comparison, it's about 2 points behind the Ravens and 3 points behind the Lions, the offenses that are putting up the most points regularly right now. Their rushing offense is 3rd, though. Everyone's going to look at Jayden Daniels in the passing game, but they've been able to run the ball as well. What are the things that the Steelers have to key in on to improve from the first half of the season? They were the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL, so they certainly had their own good, strong track record. But what do they have to key in on to make sure that they improve going into this big matchup?
Yeah, I think overall, Chris, you look at the 8-game sample first half of the season, they're one of the best statistical defenses in the NFL, but you're only as good as your last outing too. And the Steelers against the Giants, who, I think we should point out, I think they're the 26th or 27th scoring offense in the NFL. They ran for 157 yards against the Steelers. They put up almost 400 yards against the Steelers. So the Steelers have a lot of things to fix. I thought things were way too easy on the ground. Tyrone Tracy getting yards after contact, big 45-yard run. And I thought also things were way too easy for Daniel Jones. You look at Daniel Jones in that game yesterday against the Commanders, Chris. He had 0 passing yards at halftime. Now, I know the final score was 27-22. It ended up being a close game, but, the Steelers made Daniel Jones look like, Patrick Mahomes for much of that game. So they got some things they got to straighten out, but I think first and foremost, the way the Steelers are built, shut down the run, get that corrected, get that back where that was before the Giants game. And if they can do that, I think they'll have a pretty decent shot of winning in Washington on Sunday.
I agree. I wonder if this too, Ray, when I was watching the game, both live and after the fact, I wondered how much of it was because they were trying to honor Daniel Jones's scrambling ability so much. Like there were so many runs where you saw Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt kind of play a little bit deeper and look for that option run, and then the running back was able to tuck just inside of them to get a gain, off of what they were worried about the QB option. I mean, Jayden Daniels is faster than Daniel Jones, so. Looking at those possibilities there, I think that's part of the answer is they need to be able to balance what they want to do on defense to take away the QB running option as well as the normals, the immediate reads in the passing game, but stuffing the run. And Mike Tomlin says it every year, stuffing the run is paramount. You have to be able to take that away. If you don't take that away, it opens everything else up for an offense. And this is a really good rushing offense that you're facing this week to test what you can improve upon.
Yeah, and for the Steelers, only Lamar Jackson has more rushing yards among quarterbacks. Jayden Daniels is second. I think he has close to 450 yards rushing this year, but he hasn't really shown the ability or the willingness to tuck it and run as much as he did before his rib injury. If you look what he did against the Giants yesterday, I think 35 rushing yards. He's still going to tuck it and keep it when he has to, but I don't think it's going to be as big a part of their offense as it was before the injury. So the Steelers can kind of say, hey, listen, if you want to run, yeah, we're going to put a helmet on you. We're going to hit you when you do run, but maybe they don't have to sell out and do what they did against the Giants and Daniel Jones. So that's kind of an interesting cat and mouse game that I think is going to go on. Do the Commanders want to put him in harm's way against a defense like the Steelers? That's going to be, an interesting thing to watch and see how it unfolds on Sunday.
I think so too. Another factor to see here is, we're talking about the run defense. The pass defense also has to be better. The Steelers' run defense is actually one of the best in the NFL statistically. The pass defense, not so much as far as the yards they've allowed. Now they've had really good games. They've shown the ability to defend the pass, but we've also seen their miscommunication breakdown. We've also seen mistakes that have led to plays being open over the middle, and those are the things that they cannot allow to happen for a rookie quarterback in this game. But this week, they're getting back Cameron Sutton. Now, will they use him? That's another question. But, Ray, what do you think the impact is getting a veteran like Cameron Sutton back in this roster? We talked about his addition back when they signed him in the offseason.
Yeah, so Terrell Austin spoke with us last week before they broke for their off weekend. And, I asked Terrell, is Cam going to go right back into the slot? He said no. They're going to work him in. You're going to see how he is, what his football shape is like. But I didn't get the sense that Beanie Bishop was just going to get subbed out 100% of the time in this first matchup against the Commanders. Now, that's eventually going to happen. Yeah, probably, but it might be a game or two down the road once they see how Cam Sutton is physically, his conditioning, where he is with his conditioning and stuff like that. So, with Cam, you get a versatile chess piece. This guy can play outside if there's an injury. He can certainly play in the slot, which is where he's going to play the most. And they have the option to put him back at safety. And we all know the Steelers have had some injury issues at safety this year with KZ and with Elliott being on the injury report. So it's nice to have someone like that who can move back and play safety if they need it. So it just adds versatility. It adds depth. I think it's going to be really good for the Steelers defense in the second half of the season to have a guy like Cam Sutton at their disposal.
Right. And here's the other thing. Cam Sutton doesn't just have to replace Beanie Bishop in the slot. That's not the only place that he can line up. Where they've been putting James Pierre when Dante Jackson gets hurt, that's where he can go. Where they've been throwing in Terrell Edmonds in the safety rotation, he can go there. Cameron Sutton, like one of the biggest things that he's had on his side in his entire career is he's been a smart football player who communicates well, who understands how to play different roles. I mean, back when they drafted him out of Tennessee, that one of the things that were noted about him in the draft class when he was a 3rd round pick was that he could play every single position in the secondary and do it well. And I think that's where, if you're a veteran coming into the Steelers right now, if he can do that and be a guy that floats around the defense, he's solving problems for you. And Minkah Fitzpatrick talked about, hey, they need to improve their communication. They need to shore up on those things. And those were the 2 things that really hurt them the most against the Colts and the Cowboys. They're 2 losses this season. If they're going to be prepared this year or this week, they need that communication to be up. Maybe he becomes an asset some way. But like you said, I don't think that Beanie Bishop's just going to be taken off the field, especially when he has 3 picks in the last 2 games. And he's played well. I think the Steelers like the tenacity that he brings to the slot cornerback position. But look, I agree with you. Like, look for him to help in different ways because his experience, his knowledge can certainly be a factor that helps this pass defenses. And also I think that there needs to be some tuning up of putting guys in better positions to make plays. Like Joey Porter Jr. I think he had some plays last week or 2 weeks ago that he could have made against the Giants that would have helped seal that deal. Like on a 3rd and 16, he had his receiver right in front of him on a hook route, and he doesn't defend the sticks well enough. Dante Jackson giving up inside leverage on some plays. I think that if they're able to fine tune those things right there, get those fundamentals things kind of down a little bit more, it'll start to force defenses or offenses to have to be a little bit more aggressive and maybe even actually throw the ball at Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, if you look at all the starters that they have in the secondary so far, he's the least targeted starting defensive back on the Steelers roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, if you look at it, if Cam Sutton was eligible to come back after the Cowboys game, I definitely think he would have just walked right in and played slot corner because that was Beanie Bishop's worst game. But you said it. Beanie has played much better. It gives them some time now and some creativity to sit back and say, how can we use him best? Can we get Beanie in there in certain situations where he can help us? Or do we have to go to Cam in this situation? I think Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin are smart enough to figure that out. And I think, like I said at the top, that versatility, the ability to play all over the secondary is going to be a big benefit for the Steelers here in the second half.
Absolutely. When we come back, I want to talk about the AFC North because the Steelers still sit at first place, but what do the other AFC North teams do, and how does that impact the outlook for the division as we head to the second half of the season? We'll do that all next here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you also by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation today. That is Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website, moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, Car and Driver's most awarded brand in 10 Best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, the AFC North had all home games this weekend. 2 games came out with wins. 1 team came out with a loss. The Ravens completely destroyed the Broncos, 41-10 in their house. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry doing what they do. The defense shutting down Bo Nix and the Broncos. The Bengals won convincingly over the Raiders, 41-24. Joe Burrow throwing 5 touchdowns against the Raiders defense and the Raiders switching out their quarterbacks mid-game. And then but then the Browns, after Jameis Winston said this is a new day for the Browns and everything was going to go right for them, he comes out, those 3 interceptions, they get utterly demolished by the Chargers 27-10, and the Browns look like they're definitely going to be settling into last place at 2-7 in the AFC North. So Ray, throwing the Browns out of the conversation, they've been out. It's been rough. It's been rough for them. That they've kind of been a team, but the Bengals are now a team who have kind of stormed back. They are 4-5, so that puts them 2.5 games behind the Steelers. They've won 4 of their last 6 games, and that 3 of the last 4. But I also like I said before, they haven't beaten if you look at all the combined records of the teams, I think it's like there might be like 3 wins between them with the Giants, Browns, Raiders, and Panthers. So maybe like 4 or 5 wins between them. But they got the Ravens in Baltimore this upcoming week, and I believe actually this Thursday night football. Are you convinced that the Bengals are back, or that they're going to be doing some serious damage, or is this kind of their next 3 games are Ravens, at Chargers, bye week, and then they get the Steelers? Yeah. I feel like this will be the period that determines if Joe Burrow and the Bengals are back. Yeah,
it kind of feels like we'll know by Thanksgiving whether they're going to be a contender or not. I got to be honest with you. I went through their schedule this morning. I could see them getting to 10 wins. Mm-hmm. Now, they gotta do well in this next 3-game stretch here. Go to 2-1 at the worst in this 3-game stretch. But if they do, the schedule does lighten for them after that. So, they're an interesting team. I still think the Jets are an interesting team in the AFC. Their schedule lightens considerably also in the second half. But the Bengals kind of saw the turmoil with Joe Burrow and what's that guy's name? Jermaine Burton, the receiver who was disciplined, and there's some stuff going on there right now. But I'm never gonna doubt Joe Burrow. That guy's been too good, and for me to say they're not gonna have a say in how this unfolds in the second half. I definitely give them a puncher's chance, but I think both of these games against the Ravens and the Chargers are on the road too, so they got to get it done. They haven't been a good home team, so you better be good on the road, and you better show that the next 2 weeks against the Ravens and the Chargers.
I agree that this is the chance to prove it if you're the Bengals here, showing that these wins they've been able to stack. This is the sign that they're fixing things. But their 20-point loss to the Eagles the other week kind of just made that. But hey, they got a chance to get revenge on the Ravens, who beat them earlier this year, and then they go against the Chargers, who right now are the number 1 defense. But let's look at the Ravens real quick, Ray, because the Ravens had a disappointing loss to the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland last week, but they certainly rebounded very well in beating up on the Denver Broncos. They're in a position where they have this chance to, if they can sweep the Bengals, they might put the Bengals in their rearview mirror, while also giving them a chance to put pressure on the Steelers. If they win this game Thursday night, all of a sudden they're in first place in the AFC North. I think that's how that works. 7-3 is better than 6-2. Excuse me. This is the time of the year where I get annoyed by when one team's technically half a game ahead of the other because of bye weeks and such. It just gets on my nerves. But they have a chance to put pressure on the Steelers, where if the Steelers lose to the Commanders, they lose first place in the division before these 2 teams even play. What's your outlook as far as what you see in the Ravens? They added Deontay Johnson. He was a 0 factor in this game, but still they have a ton of weapons on offense.
Yeah, I was going back and forth yesterday between the CBS game, which was the Ravens game, and then the Fox had the Bengals and the Raiders. And the Broncos had some missed opportunities early in that game. Bo Nix threw that early pick. He also missed a guy, took a deep shot on 4th down in the end zone, just overthrew him by 2 or 3 steps. Or they had that play. So that game certainly could have been different if it wasn't for Bo Nix's inaccuracy and maybe just warming up to it, early in that game. But the Ravens offense is so good. I kind of get why Sean Payton was going for it on 4th down early in that game. They're a juggernaut. When Lamar Jackson is playing the way he was on Sunday against the Broncos, they are a juggernaut. So I still think they're the class of the AFC North. They got some head-scratching losses. I get it, but to me, they got the best quarterback in the division, and that counts for a lot. And I think that's going to go a long way here in the second half of the season, as long as they cut out these losses to the likes of the Raiders and the Browns. For their sake, they got to hope they're not kicking themselves in early January when it comes to seeding because you lose to teams like that.
Agreed. But here's the other thing, Ray. We talk about the Steelers' second half schedule. The Ravens isn't exactly clean either. They get this game against the Bengals, who took them to the mat in the last game. They still have 2 games against the Steelers. We know the Steelers give the Ravens a hard time. They like the Bengals, they have to play at the Chargers. They have to play the Eagles. They do get the Giants, but they also have to play the Texans, and then they have to play the Browns again. So, I look at the Texans, the 2 games against the Steelers, the Eagles, the Chargers, and the Bengals game. All of those to me are very much up in the air games for the Ravens. They still have a lot to prove, just like the Steelers have a lot to prove. But I think that's what makes this division really exciting and why we're going to have to be dealing with Hard Knocks cameras for the next 2 months as we cover the Steelers here in Pittsburgh.
Yep. That starts this week, I think. I mean, Chris, if you look at the AFC, you're going to have the Chiefs up here. Even if the Chiefs lose a couple of games, they're going to be the 1 seed. Then it's going to be the Bills. I think the Steelers and the Ravens, I think the winner of that division will be 11-6. You noted the difficulty of both of those schedules. You're going to have a very good team going into the playoffs as a number 3 or a number 4 seed, and that can be a dangerous thing when it comes to the seedings and just how good these teams are. So that's definitely something to watch.
And certainly we've talked all offseason about the importance of the Steelers if they could host a playoff game, not have to go on the road to play Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in the first round of the playoffs in their crib. If they were to bring a team to there, and again, if you're looking at how the playoffs could play off, you could be talking about like if they were the 3 seed, they'd be playing the Broncos in Pittsburgh if the playoffs were to start today. If they were the 4 seed, they'd be playing, I believe, the if they'd be playing the 6th seed, I apologize, would be the Chargers, who they've already beaten. If they were the 2 seed, they'd be playing the Broncos. But if they're the 4 seed, they'd be playing the Ravens at that situation. But again, you'd rather be playing one of those teams in your house than having to be going on the road in a matchup where you definitely need a few things to bounce in your favor against 2 premier quarterbacks that have had a pretty good history against you. So to do all that, they got to get back on it and continue their win streak against the Commanders this upcoming Sunday in Washington, D.C. We'll have you covered all week long heading into that. Remember, the trade deadline is Tuesday. We'll have you covered at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we'll be back here Wednesday after the trade deadline talking about the moves they did or didn't make, and as well as how things are looking after the Tomlin press conference heading into this week of practice for the Steelers. From Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, thanks again for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Remember to get all those Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this, if you enjoyed, subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes as well as daily content that comes out from our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as all of our locker room interviews that happen throughout the year. We'll be back here Wednesday on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.